Hello and welcome to another episode of Sanity Killer Projects. Today we are going to be changing spark plugs on this 2017 Jeep Cherokee high altitude latitude 3.2 six-cylinder. This is not one of the easiest jobs. If you don't have at least the basic knowledge of how to do mechanical work, this is not a project that should be attempted. You should definitely consult a qualified mechanic if you're not sure on how to do a job like this. But for those of you who do have a little bit more knowledge as to how to work on cars and stuff, this is a difficult task, one that I've been trying to avoid for quite a while because I just didn't want to get involved in it. And now, unfortunately, it is summertime, and I'm going to end up having to break up the sessions on this over a couple hours because the heat of the day will drive me out of the garage. So let's pop the hood and take a look at what's going on, and then we'll start. Okay, so here's the engine. One of the easiest and first tasks we're going to do is we're going to take this cover off of the motor. It's just pressed down into some rubber grommets, so we're going to pop those up and get the cover off. And there is the motor. That's what we're going to be working on today. The reason why this is a difficult job and shouldn't be attempted unless you have some basic mechanical knowledge is because 3 of the spark plugs are back here underneath the air intake system, and the other 3 are underneath the air intake itself, right about here. There's no way to access it without removing a whole lot of parts from around the intake and the intake itself. So we're going to start by doing the back 3. The reason why we're going to do those is because once you go to these front 3, the air intake is open and it needs to be covered. So the less chance of getting something down inside of them, the better. So we're going to start by removing the intake hose, the air box, and a couple of the parts along the back. It's some of the hoses, and then we'll change those plugs and then move up to the front. Okay, so seeing as we're dealing with the spark plugs and you have to disconnect a lot of electrical plugs, the very first thing we're going to do is remove the negative terminal on the battery cable. Easy to do. 10mm wrench, unscrew the screw off of it, wiggle the connector until it comes loose. The next thing that happens, air cleaner hose comes off. It takes a flathead screwdriver on either side, loosen the clamps, and wiggle either side until one side pops off, and then take it off and move it out of the way. On the back side of it, there is a push connector that is attached to your coolant hose, your coolant overflow tank, and it's the overflow line. This doesn't have to come off. You can take it off if you want. You're just fighting off another push connector. Once everything is said and done, that is fine right there in its place because there's nothing going to be open directly in the vicinity of it. So the next thing is there's a check valve that sits on the top. To get it off, you push the back tab down. That gets the electrical part loose. A lot of times on this particular one it sticks. It's easier to get a little bit of a screwdriver in there and work on it. Be careful, it's a plastic connector and it will break. Also, there's a vacuum line that's connected to it on the bottom. To get it off, you have to work this clip loose until it comes all the way up, and then once it's in a position like this, it will slide off. That can get moved out of the way so that it can be put back on later. Then normally you'd be able to slide this guy up off of the rubber grommet, but in my case, while I was trying to get the push connector that's attached to this this cable in the back, I put too much pressure on it because it's plastic and the connector broke off. So I'll fix that so that it's mounted back in the position once we're going to put that back on, but for now we can just take it and move it out of the way. In most cases you would lift this off and then move it out of the way. Okay, so remember at the beginning when I said this was a task where if you didn't know what you're doing, you should definitely consult your mechanic. I'll explain exactly why. There's a connector on the front of this air box that pops out that allows you to be able to remove this. Mine is jammed, wouldn't come out. When I put too much pressure on it, broke the front mount while pulling the thing off. It snapped the back mount. Okay, so this isn't uncommon on these. Because everything's plastic, because of how cheaply made everything is, these mounts do have a tendency to break. In this particular case, it is actually okay. I can still keep functioning. This will still work. The only thing is that if you're going to use a vehicle like this for off-roading, you can't really have something like this bouncing around. This isn't an off-road car. This is my commuter car. All it does is freeway miles. Driving around with it, sitting on the back mount and sitting on the front mount will be enough to keep it in place because it's held in with the clamp and with the clamp on the other side. So this makes me look like an unexperienced noob, but in actuality, when it comes down to it, this kind of stuff happens. So the only other thing with this that I wanted to explain is there's a connector that's on the back. I've tucked that in over there. There's just a little push connector on it. You just push down on the back of it and it comes away from it. So to remove your coil pack off of the back of the engine here, you take a screwdriver, put it in between the metal bit here and the connector and push down. This will allow you to slide the connector off. Then take 10mm and undo this guy in the back. The screw will come loose. It won't come off completely. Once it's all the way up and loose, grab a hold of it and wiggle back and forth, and the boot will pop off. This is your coil pack and your spark plug boot. Okay, because of the tight space back here, you're going to kind of have to build up inside of the spark plug wall and then get it to where it fits. As you can see, if I were to take this off, this actually won't fit out of here. So only real way to do this is to build it up and make it so that you can get the parts in piece by piece. And then you just unscrew it until the thing wants to come out. These have a lot of threads on them. They're a very long threaded spark plug. And once you get it out, they come out like that. So that's the old spark plug. I'm going to prep the new spark plug and put it in, and we'll show you how to put it back together. Okay, as I'm finishing up doing this plug install on this one, I want to go over a couple of things. The plug that came out is a RER8ZWYCB4 Champion. I am replacing them with XP5701. These are an iridium plug. I would suggest using something on the higher end of plugs because these plugs are expected to be in here for 120,000 miles. This car is just short of 120,000 miles now, and these are a pretty good plug for what they are. There are more expensive ones. I don't like the type with the quad things over the top of them. Those are the ones that were more expensive than these. These are for this style, what would be considered middle of the road for this type, but I think they're a good plug, so those are the ones I decided to use. Also, the spark plugs should come gapped from the manufacturer to the correct specs because they're used specifically for these cars, but you should always double check your spark plug gapping. This is just a dinky little dial one. It needs to go to 0.043 is the correct setting for these plugs. Now you can put dielectric grease on the top of the plug so that you get a good connection between your spark plug probe. You can also put thread sealant on it. I don't not thread sealant, anti-seize. I don't recommend putting anti-seize on it because anti-seize does one thing in particular, which is increases the torque spec, and seeing as these go to 13 inch-pounds or roughly 1 foot-pound, the best way to do these is just to put them in, and when you get them to where the spark plug just snugs, that's good enough. Don't want to keep going past that. That's where those are going to set. The dielectric grease on the top of the plug, though, there's nothing wrong with that. It just helps make the connection between the metal inside of the boot and the top of the plug get a better electronic connection, and help them pop the pieces in and out easier as well because they're then lubricated. So what I'm going to do now is put this one back on, and then I'm going to go to the next one and the next one and keep going on that. I'm not going to show that part. We'll go to the intake manifold removal after that. All right, so I went ahead and did these three. Those three spark plugs have been changed out. The next thing I started doing was disassembling stuff on the top of the intake. All of the wires in this harness have to come loose. All the connectors are completely different, so it makes it real easy to put the right one in the right place when you're done. This one was off of something that we've already taken off. This comes off of the side. There's a little red clip here. You push it back and then squeeze down on the side of the connector and it pops loose. This one has a little tab that pulls back and it goes into this sensor right here and it comes loose. Once those are off, there are two little plastic clips with the metal bracket that just squeeze over them. They're just push-on connectors that hold these in place so that they don't come loose. There's one here and there's one that just sits on the back where my middle finger is touching. Once you get that loose, all that harness is then away from the intake and you can access all of that. There's also a vacuum hose back here for the vacuum brake booster. I've taken that off. There's also another one on the other side right here that comes off and it goes into the side into a valve that's sticking out right here. This one took a little bit more effort to get off, actually, to get a screwdriver underneath the edges of it and break it loose. It was like heat sealed onto it. There's a line in the front that goes on to your air cleaner box. That comes off. Same thing, there's two of those push connectors. They just go onto these little front brackets here and they just keep the line in place. This moving them, disconnecting them, gets it to where you have space to get in and around. At this point it's getting too hot out here, so the next time I get back it'll be a few hours from now, once the weather's cooled down, and we'll get the air cleaner the air intake the rest of the way off. Alright, so the point we're at here, I've taken all the parts that hold the intake manifold in place off. I'll go over those so that we all know what's going on. There are 4 10mm nuts. One of them is here, one of them is here. The other two are in the back on this bracket. One of them is on that stud, one of them is on this stud that is being covered by my finger right there. Okay, so to get this bracket away from it, there is a bolt. It's actually a stud that goes in to the block that sits down here and is attached to a wiring harness. It's a 13mm stud. You back this off and get all the bolts, nuts and bolts loose on the manifold. This gives everything a little bit of wiggle room so that you can take this bracket and push it off of the studs. Be careful when pushing it off of the studs. If you pry too much, you'll end up breaking the studs off because it goes into a plastic case. I didn't have an issue with any of that. I just got it loose and shoved it back, so now this is off and hanging and still attached to the stud in the back. Then there are these studs that are part of the intake manifold. They don't come all the way out. These are 8 millimeters. There are 3 in the back, 1, 2, 3. Then there are 3 in the middle. One right here, one that goes down into that opening down there, and one that goes down into that opening right there. Once all that's off, you take the manifold and lift and pull away. The reason why you do it that way is because there are 2 ways to take this off. There's moving this bracket in the back, or you'd have to move these brackets in the front. I don't suggest moving these brackets in the front. They're a lot harder to move. There's a lot more stuff in the way. If you move that one in the back, it's one stud. You don't have to fight with anything else. You just pick the thing up from the back and go that way so that you get it off of the studs in the front. That the intake manifold's off, so the next thing I need to do is cover all this up, because this is the intakes into the engine, and if you don't keep it covered, you're going to get junk down in them, and that's the last thing you want. Okay, so from here it gets pretty easy. You have your intake manifold off. You take this foam gasket, just a protector, off. You definitely do this after you've covered the intake up, because this is always covered in dirt and grease and nasty stuff, and it's just a piece of foam. Now that we've done that, you can see that we can get to the coil packs in the front. So it works just like the last one. You put a screwdriver into here. This guy pulls off. And once that guy's off, take a 10 millimeter, loosen up the bolt. Pop the coil pack in the boot, set it to the side, and there's your spark plug down in the hole. So next thing you do is spark plug socket down into the hole. Nice and easy, because those spark plug tubes down in there are really thin. Pop it loose. Okay, that's that. So next we'll go back to reassembly. I'll keep going on all these, put the new spark plugs in all of them, and we'll start when we put it all back together. Alright, so at this point the spark plugs are back in. I'm going to take a little foam pad piece, put it back in there, make sure it's nice and down and in all the grooves where it was sitting at before. We're going to take our towels off of the intake, and then we're going to set the intake back in place. It's real easy. Set it on these studs that are in the studs that are in the front. Set it on those brackets right there. And then once it is down in place, set her down. So the intake is set back in place. The first thing that you need to do is you got to get this back bracket back into place. I was hoping that I'd be able to sneak it back on, but this bolt right here didn't give enough slack for it to be able to sneak the thing on. But if you could see down there, this guy right here is the stud. all I did was back it up. This bracket for this wiring harness stays with it, and with the stud, and you back it all the way out. You're going to end up having to get out just enough to sneak it over these screws or these studs and put some bolts started on it, and then just plug it right back in and screw it back down. It's a pain, but it's still easier than doing the front ones. So once these are on, the next things I got to do is put the front two back in, and then the 6 along the top, and then we'll come back. Okay, I got to amend something before I go too far. There are 3 screws here in a row. There are 3 more parallel away from it. There's 1 more in the opening over here. There's 7 total. I kept saying 6 because I forgot about this guy, but 2, 2, 2, and 1 over here. Okay, now everything gets pretty easy. I'm gonna hook up vacuum line, the manifold. This guy just slides on here until it goes all the way up. This guy, there's another one back here. This is for your vacuum brake booster. Then you start putting the clips back on. This clip goes here, it just holds everything in place. This one goes into here, clicks, and then you push the little red tab in on the inside here. This one goes to the back of the throttle body, goes on. Little keeper on the side, red thing gets pushed back in. There's also another thing that keeps the wires protected right there. Okay, so the front air line that goes along right here for the air filter, I put on separately. The 2 little clips clip back into here. The reason why I put it on off camera is because, like everything on these plastic kind of cars, stuff breaks. The zip tie snapped off here, and the little horseshoe clip that goes in there broke off in the middle. So I was able to put it back in, but I wanted to put a wrap of tape around it to make sure it doesn't come apart. I'm not making any effort to like hammer mechanic any of this stuff. It's just made out of cheap plastic. It's a problem with newer cars. Things break. You have to be prepared to fix them sometimes. There's another airline or vacuum line that has a similar horseshoe shaped connector, which is over here. This is the little connector. The one over there broke in the middle. All you really have to do is pop these up. Once you get them popped up to there, the line will come in and out, but the other one snapped off. So I put the pieces down in so that it was held in place and threw a wrap of tape around it. Okay, so at the point we're at here, the airbox is back on, and as I mentioned before, I broke the brackets for it. So I wanted to show how it's in here. It's sitting on the front bracket in the groove that it goes in. It's sitting on the back bracket in the groove that it goes in, and I've only got 1 hose attached onto it. It's connected on this side and it's tight, and it's pretty well in place, so it's not going to move around when I'm driving. Also, I installed the vacuum line on the bottom of the of this vacuum sensor, or this vacuum valve, sorry. And then I've got to connect a couple of connectors. So the front one just goes, actually let me put the little keeper that goes into the side of the airbox in, because these guys are a pain. And then this guy just goes on and clicks in. Once it's clicked in, it's in. As I mentioned, I broke the bracket for this valve also, so all I did was zip tie it in place, and as you can see, that's pretty well secured in there also. The other clip that needs to go in is this hookup for the airbox. All this stuff is air sensing. It tells the computer system how much air is where and where it needs more air to make sure that the car is running right. So at this point, I got to put the last airline in place and put the little clip that goes for the radiator overflow bottle, and then I'll put the cover on it. Okay, so this looks a little weird because I've got the cover sitting on here backwards. I just want to show there's 4 little indents that are rubber bushings that are used to hold the pretty little cover that makes the engine look nice in place. I've already got that airline in and secured from the air filter over to the airbox. You just take this guy, set it roughly where the mounts are, and just push until they all click on. When you got all 4 of them in and the thing doesn't rattle around, that's it. So the installation part of it is done. I'm going to fire it up just so we can hear that it's running and not missing. One other honorable mention, make sure you hook the battery back up. Cars don't start unless they have power. I mentioned I was going to go start it. Probably wouldn't have done much anything if I hadn't put the battery cable back on. I just want to mention it before I get criticism on the internet about it. So if the battery's back on, I'll fire up the car. Okay, so when you fire up the car, if it sounds like this, you're fine. All the cylinders are firing properly. It's not missing. It's not stuttering. There's no faults on the computer. There's nothing out of whack. Then you've properly installed the spark plugs. Right, so at this point we're done. Car's running. Everything's working good. I just got a few things I want to mention before we're done. We basically got into our watch hours. We're still short on subscribers, so please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments about any of the work that was done, please feel free to drop me a comment in the video field, and I will happily answer anything I can when I have time. With that, please again like, share, subscribe, especially subscribe. We'll keep making more videos. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed.